Good evening. I'd like to call the school committee meeting for Monday, June 20th, 2023 to order. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Couple of things. If you have any cell phones, pagers, beepers, electronic devices, if you would kindly silence them, I would appreciate it. They may not go off in the auditorium anyway, but so be it. This meeting is being taped, but it is not being shown live because of what is ongoing. A couple of requests that I have for everyone that is here. In all seriousness, if I'm going to ask, and I can't control it, I know that, but I'm going to ask as a courtesy to all candidates, please do not make any postings or comments about tonight's meeting on social media, so that way it becomes fair for all candidates and nobody has an advantage, a disadvantage, or anything of that nature. Also, if there's any print or electronic media here tonight, I'm going to ask you the same thing, and I know, and I realize you are up against deadlines and such, but I'm going to ask you, please wait until Wednesday night when we are done, again, to be fair to all the candidates. So I thank you for that. Okay. At this time, I would like to introduce Dr. June Saber-Maguire from Brockton. Doc. Welcome back.
Great. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you? Nice to see you.
Some of us you've already met, others you haven't, and we'll take care of that in a couple of minutes. Good evening and welcome to Dartmouth. I'd like to open this interview by asking that the committee members introduce themselves.
Shall I start? I'm Shannon Jenkins. I am a member of the Dartmouth School Committee and I work at UMass Dartmouth.
Chris Oliver, also a member of the Dartmouth School Committee, and I have a daughter who's a junior here at Dartmouth High School. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Kathleen Amaral. I am a parent of kiddos. I don't know, 3 of them. They're not here. And a member of the school committee, obviously. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Hi, my name is Mary Waite. I have 2 children currently in the high school and a daughter who graduated last year and is in college this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm John Nunes. I'm the chairman of the committee. I'm a retired finance director and treasurer for a number of municipalities in the Commonwealth, and a graduate of Dartmouth High School way back when, and 2 sons that went through the system.
What year was that?
1971.
Wonderful.
So, our format this evening consists of 3 parts. We invite you to make an opening statement. After that, we have a series of prepared questions, and you have them in front of you.
Thank you
just
for
in
that.
case
Appreciate
you get
that.
lost
Yes, I
with some of
appreciate
them
that.
type of deal, and that's fine. And we will close by listening to any comments you wish to make and allow you an opportunity to ask questions of us. We have 75 minutes scheduled for this interview, and we each have had an opportunity to review your application material. We'd appreciate it if you could take the next few minutes to further introduce yourself to us and to the audience at home.
Yes, I'm incredibly excited to be here tonight. And before I even start to introduce myself, let me first thank the screening committee. First of all, I met them at 8:30 in the evening. And I have to say that I did share with many folks how attentive they were to me and how much I appreciated that. And it was quite a long evening, and I'm sure a long couple of weeks for them and their hard work. And I want to thank you for inviting me back to talk with you here in Dartmouth. So first and foremost, I want to say thank you to all members of the screening committee, and certainly thank you to the audience that's here tonight. There are quite a few people in the audience. I really appreciate that you coming out. That shows your interest and your commitment to the Dartmouth Public Schools, which was on full display here today in your schools, so that was really exciting to see, and I hope I get to talk more about that. But and thank you, of course, to all of you before me, the school committee members, who I know what an important decision this is for you, for your community, for your students, for all of your community stakeholders and your teachers, and I don't take that lightly. So I want to thank you again for your service. As far as a little bit more about me, as you said, you have seen my resume. I'm sure many have taken, at least perused it. I have a 29-year career in public education. 29 of those years, yes, have been in the Brockton Public Schools. I'm very proud of my work history. I'm very proud of the community that has given me so many opportunities to grow as an educational leader in the many roles that I've had, and I've said this several times today, the most important being that of teacher. The most important role I have ever had in my career, and really in many ways my life, is that of an educator in the classroom. That's always first and foremost in my mind and in my heart. And really, when I think about it, I want you to know, and teachers here to know, that I certainly look at everything through the lens and the eyes of a teacher. Luckily for me, I was given more opportunity in Brockton, and that's what it was. It was lots of opportunities to grow as a leader. I was a district-level leader. I was a school-based leader. Again, another very proud accomplishment for me was that of principal, and I can't underestimate that enough. I think the role of principal is one of the most, not one of the, but a most critical position in your school system. And then from there, I was able to take a lot of what I learned as a principal to a district-level position where I was able to oversee 11 elementary schools, and as a former elementary principal, proud to say that I was able to bring much of the work that I had done in that school to other principals within the district and watch them to be able to implement some of that work in their own schools and lead their schools to success. Then I became the chief academic officer. Again, I don't want to give you a litany of my work history. I can tell you stories about why I became a chief academic officer. It was a new position in the school district, and it really allowed me to work in through a K-12 lens and with a real focus on teaching and learning. I'm currently an assistant superintendent in Brockton. I'm really excited about that work and am working and focused on expanding opportunities for our youngest learners, our pre-K learners, our special education students, and I'm also focused on supporting our community schools program, which is a program that offers lots of additional opportunities for kids in the Brockton Public Schools. So really excited to be here with you tonight. That's like a 29-year career. I hope I encapsulated it well, and I get to talk about some of the work that I've done during those 29 years tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have the first question this evening, so we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm interested in how you use research about educational practice to support your decision-making processes. For example, recent research provides suggestions as to appropriate amounts of homework for different grade levels and how school start times affect academic performance. Can you describe how you stay current with research into educational best practices, and give us an example of how you have used research to guide policy changes in your past positions?
That has to be a question from a college professor, I know it. So having research to support decision-making in education is critical. And, you know, in the interest of transparency, I do remember a time way back when in education, something may be implemented in the school district, and many of us may say, well, that's nice, that's research, but what's practical about research? So in my entire career, though, as a school leader and a principal and a district level leader, I've really leaned into research, and I've leaned into research because it provides you with the framework that you need to be able to work with others to help them to understand the why of why you may be doing something or working toward making a decision. And when I talk about research, I'm talking about real research, research that's grounded in not only theory, but research that's grounded in practice. Having just recently completed my dissertation, that's certainly work that is up close and personal for me, and I understand the implications of research in the field of education, particularly right now for me, pre-K to 12. It's actually one of the reasons I'm incredibly interested in the superintendency, because my slice of my dissertation was a focus on the superintendency and the superintendency's influence on impacting the development of critical consciousness and what role social networks play. So I understand how important research is. As far as decisions that I've made, work that I've made to help school committee members make decisions that I think were in the best interest of the Brockton Public Schools. I'm going to talk about one in particular that I think was a really big deal in the city, and that was changing the start date for our kindergarten students. Brockton was one of 5 communities that had a start date or a date of December 31st for our children to start school. And what we were finding, and again, this was decades where this policy in practice was in place, and there were grumblings along the line. There were always people who were concerned about that. But what I was able to do with the support of my then superintendent was to dig into research to be able to provide the real whys that was not developmentally appropriate for the children in our city, and then use data to support the fact that those were the very students who we were seeing were having the most difficulty in meeting both their social emotional learning needs and their academic needs. And so really leaned into research in a way that we were able to present. We had a school committee retreat, and along with my colleagues, we were able to put a presentation together that not only used developmental research on what's grade level appropriate, starting with our youngest pre-K, early 4-year-olds, and older 4- and 5-year-olds. We were able to show in concrete terms what the differences were, and even though they were nuanced differences, they were differences, and that really helped the school committee to be able to make that decision to vote to change that date. I think what was also important about that was at the same time we made that commitment, that was a hardship for our families because there were many families who relied on the public schools. We have full day K in Brockton, and they were relying on our schools for certainly the academic experience for their children, but also the child care. And so we simultaneously started to open pre-K classrooms so that we were doing the best we could to meet the needs of our students and our families. That was, again, a challenge. We started off with half-day programs. I was really thrilled to see here in Dartmouth that you have full-day pre-K. We found that the half-day programs for our families didn't work, and we were actually losing more students than we were gaining. So we were able to expand that over, really, it was a 3-year plan where the first year we offered seats, lottery seats to our children that were born in November and December, and then the following year, September and October, so from September to December. Currently, we are able to offer seats we had about 400 students that fell within that range, that age range, and right now we have 400, as of last week, 438 students who are in pre-K classes in Brockton and looking to expand even more. So we did lean into the research for that. The same thing for, I want to say I implemented school uniforms as a principal, definitely relied on research to support that decision. Again, school committee, that was a policy the school committee voted on. We implemented an extended school day. That was something that we definitely had to lean into research to show how extended learning in certain situations for certain children would benefit them. And by providing that kind of research to our school committee, we were able to get the support that we needed to move forward at a time where there wasn't a lot of funding to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have the next one, Dr. McGuire. Can you tell the committee about a great decision that you made, and likewise, one that you probably should not have? And what did you learn?
I think I could make it, like, I'm going to tell about the same decision. So when I became a principal, I was really excited in working with my faculty to avert what we saw as a possible takeover by the state. That was really the situation that the school was confronting. So part of what we did was come together as a faculty, and we literally brainstormed what it was that we needed to do to change the conditions for the children in our school so that their academic performance improved. And there were a whole host of things that came out of that. So now to my decision making. One of the items on my chart, when that's what we had chart paper, was that we needed to move the school. That we were in a building that was built in 1893, that it was a very obviously old school. The facility was somewhat worn down. There was no green space for the kids. They played in the parking lot between the teachers' cars, the staff's cars. We did not have a full-service cafeteria. So there were a lot of reasons why we felt as a staff that our students should have access to a better facility, a more improved, a more modern facility. And there happened to be a school open that was empty just about a half-mile away. As a matter of fact, it was the school that I went to first grade in. So I'm not talking about a brand new school. I'm talking about an older building, but it had many of the things that I just mentioned we didn't have. So excitedly, I brought that forward to the families, and we had a couple of open houses. We were real excited about it. I got a couple of our school committee members on board, certainly the one that represented the part of the city that I was the principal in, and we had a big open meeting where we invited the public, and surprisingly to me, there were many, many people there who did not support the decision. It was not a good decision on my part, and the reason that I say that it was a real learning experience for me is because I really, at that point, had surrounded myself with people who agreed with me and probably sought them out at that point. I don't doubt, but those were the people that were around me, and there were people that came out in the community that didn't support the move for reasons that I wasn't aware of. And some of the reasons were really valid. And had I done more homework and preparation in moving that forward before the public, I think I would have avoided some of what happened that evening. And a couple of parents were very unhappy with things like their students were bus students and now they were going to be walkers, things like the logistic part of a school move. And then there were other things like the school is a historic school in the city, the Huntington School Parade, the Campello Business Association wasn't happy. There were a lot of people that were alumni of the school, so there were a lot of pieces of it that I didn't consider. So it didn't work out, and we stayed put. Another student population moved into that school, and when I say a good decision that I made is a couple of years later when we had a different opportunity and there were more buildings available for this particular special population that was now in the school that we wanted to move those children into became available. And so by taking the lessons that I had learned from my previous experience and bringing stakeholders together in a different way, and it doesn't mean that everybody was on board because they weren't, But at the same time, we were able to provide people with the how, with the why, and for every concern, we were able to respond with I think with something that would put them more at ease about that move. So those two things balanced each other out. I'm really happy to say that the students, again, it was 4 years after I left the school, so I never had the opportunity to work in the school as the principal, but that student population is now in that school, full-service cafeteria, a full-service gym, green space, and so I'm really excited and happy every time I go there. I feel really validated to see the children have access to an upgraded facility.
Thank you, ma'am.
I have the next question. While we are all committed to ensuring the best education for Dartmouth's children, and our school personnel do a lot with a little, financial resources in the town are modest, to say the least. Given these financial limitations will only be exacerbated by the ending of federal ESSER funding and a very bleak Chapter 70 proposed budget, what types of creative ideas might you suggest to meet the educational needs of all our students, from those who need special education supports as part of an IEP plan to those who are ready for accelerated learning and accelerated instruction, that are not being met with the current budget and programs?
So, I mean, there's so much talk right now about the ESSER cliff, right? That's what we're all calling it, the ESSER cliff, and we're right on the precipice of it right now. And as a matter of fact, visiting your schools today, I actually heard quite a few educators express concern because some of their positions are funded by ESSER money, and they're folks out in your schools that are critical to the success of your students. And so they are rightly concerned, and I know they're school leaders and your district leaders, and I'm sure you are as school committee folks and as a community are as well. So there are financial limitations. Certainly I've worked through financial limitations in the past. I know that I think at my screening interview I talked about the time when I moved to central office as a principal and became the executive director of elementary education. That it was a $165 million budget, and we had to cut $10 million out of that budget. And I was responsible for a good chunk of that at that point because I was responsible for the elementary, again, 11 elementary schools, close to 9,000 students. And so part of what I did to be creative, because there were cuts, there was not any way we were going to get away with not having to make some really difficult decisions that impacted folks out in the schools and in central office. And so what I did was I brought as many stakeholder groups together as I could, listening certainly to the folks, the principals, certainly teachers. Teachers were rightly concerned about the increase in class size if we were going to be eliminating classroom teaching positions. But I really relied on my team as well, my close team at central office, to be able to look really strategically across the district, first at enrollment. And then we also looked at positions and we looked at grant money. Grant money is critical. I know that a town like Dartmouth has less access to certainly to entitlement grants than a city like Brockton. However, there are opportunities out there that aren't always related to entitlement grants. But as far as Title I was concerned, we saw some room for some movement in being able to look holistically at the school district and make decisions about positions that weren't as close to the student and positions that we felt that if we eliminated were going to really collapse the infrastructure of the support that schools have. I'm really happy to see that you have instructional coaches in your schools. I think that those are critical positions, and those were positions that were actually being discussed as cutting from our school, all of our elementary schools, and we felt very strongly that that would that would really harm our school's ability to do the work that they needed to do. Our principals felt like that, our teachers felt like that, certainly our coaches felt like that, and our central office felt like that. So we had to be creative about that. Those were locally funded positions. And so they were getting cut from the local budget. That's what was happening. They weren't called coaches, by the way, at the time. They were called IRS, Instructional Resource Specialist, and Reading Resource Specialist. And what we were able to do with those positions, because with Title I, you have to supplement, you can't supplant. I have a wonderful Title I coordinator who keeps me very straight on the difference between those two things. And we were able to repurpose those positions in a way that I feel actually benefited the school district, in that instead of being these quasi-administrative positions, we made them instructionally focused positions and rewrote the job descriptions. We were able to work very closely with our union to do that. Again, these are difficult things to do. People take their jobs very seriously, and regardless, even a change in job title causes angst for folks. So we had to be aware of that and work closely with all of our stakeholders to be able to make that move and move those folks into, so that's 22 positions that we moved out of local into Title I. I felt like that was really creative. That's the kind of thinking that I like to do with a team. And again, that's an entitlement grant, but being part of other being part of the organization in Brockton, I've also had opportunity to write grants that aren't entitlement grants. So there are opportunities out there. We have to look for them, and it's going to be really important in the next few years in communities like Dartmouth that we're creative about bringing funding in. And by the way, I saw it in your schools today. I saw donated furniture, really beautiful pieces too, by the way. I saw other opportunity. I saw your media center at your high school, beautiful center. Much of that was supported through your staff out there doing the work that they need to do to get community support to create that space for your students. It's really an amazing space.
Thank you.
Good evening. I have the next question. While I haven't been on the committee as long as Mr. Nunes down there, I have been on, this is going on my 10th year as a member of the Dartmouth School Committee, and I've seen many different leadership styles come through the superintendent's office. Please describe your specific leadership style and how it will apply to the Dartmouth Public Schools.
Oh, that follow-up question is actually a follow-up question.
Yes.
Great, okay, thank you. So, you know, it's easy to say your leadership style is collaborative. My leadership style is collaborative. I'm a collaborative leader, I'm a communicator, but I guess what I'd like to say to you, and I've done some thinking about this, is I'm an ethical leader. And so the framework through which I work through, and again, I lean into some of the work that I did through Boston College's program and my takeaways from that. And one of the courses that I got so much out of was about ethical leadership, and did a lot of reading of research about ethical leadership and how the absence of it can have a dramatic negative effect on an organization. So for me, when I really think about an ethical organization, it's the ethic of care. I believe, again, that is one of my core values. I have care, and that comes out in lots of different ways. I have an ethic of justice. Justice is firmly, I would say it's a really strongly held belief for me. And then I think really importantly, an ethic of critique. And when I say that, what I mean as an organization, we always have to be looking at and considering the impact of our decision-making on schools and students in our classrooms. And that is how I lead. It's through those lenses. And when you think about an ethic of, when I talk about, yes, I'm a collaborator, where does that come in? That comes in through an ethic of care. I care for the folks that I work with. I have genuine care for them. That's real. The only way that I believe you can get work done in this really hard work that we do in our schools and our classrooms as school committee people, as a community, is by being collaborative. There's no going it alone. Not in this field, and if you try to, you you will not succeed. I surround myself with people who are better than me, smarter than me, know different things than me. I always have something to add, but I try to find people who balance out my what I perceive as something that I could be better at. I'm always looking to be better, and I'm a learner. I take a learner stance. That's my leadership style. If I ask leaders or teachers to do something or to go through a professional development, I don't sit in my office and let them do that. I sit right beside them, and I take the same learner stance as I expect them to. So communication, care, compassion, honesty, integrity, those are really important to me, and they're the ways, they're the lenses through which I view my leadership style. I have an open door policy, I would like to say that, and I always like to tell people that I have the best candy jar in the school district, and I do have some people who would agree to that in my school district, and I say that because it does invite people into your space in sometimes informal ways where you're really able to make those deep connections that are so important to building positive relationships.
I'm going to go off the cuff here for a minute. So you talk about open door policy. You have an open door policy. Does that lie true for if you're obviously available, but if a parent were to show up at central office and they had a genuine concern and they had followed the chain of command and they went through the building principal or through the teacher to the building principal first, does that hold true to parents wanting to have a conversation with you?
100%, with all of those caveats in place that you just mentioned, because that's also really important to me, whether it were, if I were as a principal, if a parent called me directly about a concern they had in the classroom, I would listen to them, but I would definitely direct them to the teacher and give the teacher an opportunity to work that out, because I say this, and I've said this to parents, certainly at the central office level, the relationships between kids and teachers are where the work is. And so parents need to trust, parents and caregivers need to trust their teachers first. And so we really want to, as leaders, encourage problem solving to take place at that level, because that's where the closest relationships exist. I would do the same with principals if I got a call at central office, which I often did and often do. I just had a parent, actually, I got a message to call a parent today for something, and the person said, well, I want to talk to June because she's the one who helped me through this last problem. But what I would do with that is immediately take a message, and I would call the principal right away and say, this is what's going on. Do you want me to call this parent back? Do you want me to call this caregiver back? Or do you want to take the first shot at it knowing what you know better than me? And I would say to them, please let them know that I called you and talked, because I didn't want any parent or caregiver to think that I was just, ignoring their voice. And so from there, I would always talk to a parent, and I would have an open door policy. If my schedule is open, I would never turn a parent away, and if I could make changes to it, I would do that. As a matter of fact, I've had occasion, and not that long ago, where I walked into central office in Brockton, and there was a very upset parent in the foyer demanding to see the superintendent of schools, and was really upset, and it was causing people to be uncomfortable in the foyer, and they really didn't know what to do. The superintendent was not available, so I was able to work with that parent to calm them down and bring them up to my office and be able to have a conversation with them, and then work with the principal to really, I would say, work together to repair a relationship that was definitely fractured in that moment. But in a moment like that, again, as an assistant superintendent, even though I had a meeting scheduled, that was immediate, and you need to deal with immediate issues and people's emotions and not push them away, but instead find ways to build relationships and be responsive, because our parents and caregivers are so important to our school community.
Great, thank you. I think I'm going to end it right there in the respect of time.
All right, am I talking too much?
No.
Because
You are
I
fine.
just followed up with that question, so.
6:34. I want to keep track of time, so,
you're fine.
good.
You're good. Mary?
Yes. Let me just, 1 second. Okay. Independent auditors have cited Dartmouth's lack of focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion as an area that needs improvement. How would you provide leadership to address DEI within the district?
You know, that was something that your students brought up today. I had a wonderful meeting with your high school students today, and a couple of them talked about the work of DEI and how they felt that it was something that was really important in moving forward in the school community and that they would like to see it prioritized. Quite a few of them said it. I have some comments from the students that I'd like to share with you at some point. But my work around DEI started before there was such a thing as DEI. Not that there hasn't always been diversity, equity, and inclusion, because there has, but it was the minute I started in a classroom. That's work that is, I think, really central to who I am as an educator. So I've done much work in Brockton that has been focused on the work of DEI. I've done things from, again, being a classroom teacher, always creating an inclusive environment where I welcomed students to share their backgrounds. Sometimes it was in what some may consider superficial ways, but I don't. It's through food and clothing and language and all of those things that really make up who folks are. Really important to me. And beyond that, as a principal, again, honoring the families and the caregivers and the community in which I served. The school community I served was largely Cape Verdean, and we also had a good percentage of Haitian families, and making sure that we were an inclusive environment where all felt welcome was really important. We did that in some really intentional ways. One way that I was really proud of that we were able to provide our families of our English language learners, our families and caregivers, because oftentimes they were caregivers because they were students who were immigrants and coming to the country and often staying with family members, is we offered English language classes on site at our elementary school, both in the morning and in the evenings. One way to really welcome our families and caregivers into our school community. And I think one of the most startling realizations about that work was watching those families and, again, caregivers walk into the school and watching their excitement and so it gave them an opportunity to kind of demystify what goes on in schools, because oftentimes they would really be hands off. And out of respect, by the way, not because they weren't interested. They were respectful of the school community and what we did there. And watching their eyes light up when they walked by a classroom and see their children sitting in class and starting to understand what does a classroom look like, what are their children learning, what's that experience like, really important. So those little things are a big deal. Little things make up big things. Then as a district, again, a district leader going to do the work of leading folks through choosing resources that are going to be the resources that we rely on, high quality, research-based resources, and using a process to select that, being really cognizant of the curriculum materials that we were using or bringing into our district to ensure that our students, our families, that regardless of their backgrounds, whether we're talking about race, we're talking about gender, we're talking about LGBTQ, we're talking about all different stakeholder groups can see themselves in the resources that we're using to teach our students is really critical, and we were able to do that work in Brockton. Still work to do, it's never done, but we're definitely working toward those really important things. I was able to lead a PD on that work, and part of what I thought was really important, and again, I'm sure the teachers here that are sitting in your audience have done this, using the state-developed, they call it the EDI checklist, and looking through your resources and looking for instances of what we might call, either unconscious bias or sometimes it's conscious bias, but not by our educators certainly, but doing that in a meaningful way where teachers didn't feel like they were just checking a box off was really important work.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're back to me now again, and kind of circling around to checking the box. I want to talk a little bit about evaluation processes, because too often it's seen as, fulfilling mandates, checking boxes. So I want you to talk to me about maybe some examples you might offer for effective evaluation processes for teachers and administrators that actually work to improve performance and motivate personnel. And how can we engage school personnel in the evaluation process collaboratively so that it's seen as a means to improve practice as opposed to a punitive process?
Right, so again, work that I really believe in and was able to engage in, most specifically as a school principal. And certainly I've been through, the whole process of moving to a new statewide evaluation system that's largely guided by the guidelines set by the Department of Education. And so there are some must-dos in there, and we certainly recognize them, but must-dos are only as good as the how we do it. And so I think being thoughtful about the way we implement those mandated guidelines are really critical. Something that I have found successful, and by the way, something that I hear from educators is they welcome critical feedback, but that's what it needs to be, is critical feedback. I mean, the idea of evaluation it just in itself just sounds somewhat punitive sometimes. It's one of those words, but important word. At the same time, I think that offering educators an opportunity to be part of the process in which you're using whatever tool you're using, and different districts are using different tools, but including teacher voice. I don't believe in gotchas. I think, doing unannounced visits, I know it's part of the process, but it's often not a process that really yields the kind of results that are going to lead to improved teaching and learning. So one thing that I implemented as a school principal, again, at the Huntington with the teachers, right alongside the teachers, is something that we ended up calling it a peer professional development model. I think teachers learn best from each other. So what we did is we would work with our teachers would work together to develop lessons. They would go as far as to script lessons together. And it might be a grade level, let's say it was a grade 4 team that worked together, and they were developing a lesson on fractions. They would do that together, right down to the language that they were using to teach the students, and then one of them would offer to invite the others into their classroom to watch the implementation of that lesson, so they all had a stake in the success. That was something that we found was making great gains and impact on teacher practice because they were learning from each other. So I think that is a creative way that you'd obviously have to work with certainly your union to open that opportunity up, but I find that teachers are really now moving away from that idea of what happens in my classroom happens behind a closed door, but instead let's open the classroom doors up and let's learn from each other. Critical. But back to being a leader, I mean, there is a piece of the position that requires you to provide teachers with formative assessments, and that does impact their careers. And you have to be aware of the words that you use. I believe in critical feedback. I believe in honest, open dialogue, but I believe in also giving teachers, I think, the kind of feedback that has real impact on their practice, and that they can hear it and see it. And the way that you do that is by building trusting relationships. If you don't have the relationship, it doesn't matter what somebody tells you about your practice. You've already shut down and you can't hear them. So as a leader who is responsible for evaluating others, I think that it's absolutely critical that you spend a lot of time in classrooms and with the folks that you're responsible for providing feedback to, because evaluation isn't about going and sitting in the back of a room and taking observing a teacher for 45 minutes and giving them feedback that's supposed to improve or support their practice. I like to use the word support rather than improve, and I'm working on my own language in that way. So, yeah, those are a couple of things that I've done and would love to see more of in the field.
Comes back to me. How is your relationship with the school committee? And as a follow-up to this question, how do you react to the committee not going along with a program change that you and your team have put a lot of time into?
I have a great relationship with school committee members, long-standing relationships where I have taken the time to get to know school committee members. And again, depending on the role that I have and what my asks are from a school committee, I take the time to get to know folks. If I were to work with this school committee as a school superintendent, you could guarantee that I would get to know each one of you. I have already, in some ways, gotten to know each one of you. And I think that having that time, one-on-one time, I think it is really critical to understanding school committee. There's a reason each one of you sit here. There's a motivation, and I know it's in the best interest of students in your community for sure, but there are also other things that are supporting you to decide to sit on a school committee, which is a very demanding position in a community. Mr. Nunes, you've done it for a long time, and I have to give you credit as well. It's Mr. Oliver, right? Because, right? I mean, it's the school committee. I think serving on a school committee is one of the most selfless kind of positions, political positions you can hold in a community. And it's not easy because so many people have a stake in the decisions that you're making. So yes, I believe the relationship building is really important. And then how would I react to not getting along? I guess I wouldn't wait for the last minute for that to happen. I'd be working closely with all of you all along so that I'm not surprised, and I wouldn't be bringing something before you that you weren't prepared for or didn't support along the way in little pieces. So I told you about lesson learned from my experience trying to move a school and how that was failed, and part of that was because I didn't take enough time. I tried to rush that decision because I knew the school wouldn't be out there for that long, by the way, but that's another whole story. But yes, taking the time to work with all of you individually and not getting to a point where you're in a situation publicly where you're voting something that my team has put together for you. And then the other side of that is if I'm hearing from you, this isn't going to work, June, how am I going to go back to my team and work with them to make some modifications? Because there are always ways to move things forward, and sometimes they take a little bit longer. But if you can have a really clear plan and you can pull back a little bit and still see that you can get to the goal line, then that's one way that I would work with my team, because you don't want them to fail. You don't want them to feel like their efforts are unnoticed or unappreciated, because a lot of hard work goes into the plans that folks put together.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Chris?
We're going to go a little off script here, so we're going to go to Mr. Oliver here, not to confuse you. Look at Mr. Oliver and on your paper, sorry.
I'm next.
Well, you're right, you do know you're like literally right here in my ear, so I'm like, I can tell now.
Right. I'm next, and I have a question prepared for you. As you know, Dartmouth is a much smaller district than Brockton and may not have as much support and layers of personnel than a larger urban district does. How do you see the role of superintendent in Dartmouth, and how would you adjust?
You know, I love this question, and this is why. Yes, Brockton is a large district, and right now, one of your folks asked me today how many superintendents we had, and then how many assistants, and I had to tell the truth about that, and there are quite a few. However, there was a time not too long ago, and I want to say 5 years ago, where we didn't have that system or that structure. And in fact, because of budget cuts, we had to make really tough decisions about, I mentioned already, the cuts that we had to make and some of the decisions. Well, part of that also affected central office. So at the time that we had to make those major cuts, I was the executive director of elementary education. That position was cut. The position of Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning was cut from the budget. These were all parts of the superintendent's executive team. We lost the coordinator of English Language Arts and Social Studies at the middle school level. We lost the coordinator of Science and Math at the middle school level. We lost the associate principal of curriculum instruction at the high school level. So those were major cuts across the district. We created a position called Chief Academic Officer. I became the Chief Academic Officer, and many of those positions folded into that position, and I'm not saying I did that alone. I'm not trying to make myself out to be a hero, but those were all responsibilities that fell on my plate. And again, thankfully for me, I was able to retain my elementary team, who weren't elementary at all. They did everything and anything that we could as a team to support that district, Brockton Public Schools, K-12, because it's what was right for the kids and what drove them. So again, I rely on myself a lot. I'm so lucky to build a team that's willing to really stretch themselves no matter what, and that has to do with building trust. I want to talk about, again, COVID, when we went into the state shutdown. I think I mentioned this to a group earlier, so forgive me, but the first Thursday, Brockton shut down Thursday for 2 weeks of deep cleaning, right? On Friday, the state shut us down completely. And then we were left, like I'm sure you were as well, and all of us, not only in Massachusetts, but across really the world. And we knew that we had to find a way to connect with our students. And we were all told, minus a few essential people, that we could not come into our offices. I could. So I did go into my office, and then I did go into Brockton High School, and I literally ran off packets for students. And I say that, again, not to make myself sound like I'm a hero, but because I do the work that needs to be done, regardless of the position that I hold. I understand in a smaller community like Dartmouth, I definitely have friends who work in other school districts as superintendents and such, and I understand that the roles are multifaceted and that I would be doing some things that aren't part of my current responsibilities. However, I believe I've demonstrated that I'm willing to take on whatever role that I need to and to be successful at it, regardless of the infrastructure of the school district. And at the same time, I believe infrastructure is critical to the success of a school district. And we had to add all of those things in Brockton back in, by the way, because we ended up having a district review that called out all of those missing pieces.
Thank you very much.
My turn.
I'm confused now.
That's okay. You can flip the page. How visible are you at school events such as athletic games, band shows, theater performances, et cetera?
Yes, I live for those things. So I want to say that when I'm part of a school community, whether it was as a principal, I wouldn't miss an event, whether it was the Huntington School Fun Run that we had yearly, or the pancake breakfasts, or the school dances, or the Citizen of the Year, all of those really important milestone events that are part of any school community. But beyond that, now we have I think the larger events like school, whether it's sports games or theater, drama, certainly musicals. Again, I think I told this story earlier, so forgive me if you're hearing it again, but I want you to hear how important it is to me. As a school principal, one of my proudest moments was looking at my juniors and seniors at Brockton High perform in the high school musical. Brockton High is a very large school, and part of what our focus was, and I believe this, I believe that children's early learning experiences do impact their opportunities, and if we don't believe that, then that's foolish, because we want kids to have as many opportunities as they can as they grow, to give them the confidence to walk into a high school of 4,200 students and have the confidence to perform, to even try out for a performance where they may not have had that opportunity to have those experiences, those early experiences. So in our school, we held spring musicals. I love that you're doing a middle school musical here. I know you're doing, I think is it Newsies?
That's at the middle school. We're doing.
No, you're doing Mamma
We're
Mia
doing
at the
Mamma
high
Mia
school,
here.
right? I knew that. So, but I love that you're starting the kids earlier, I guess is my point, that you're giving them those early experiences so that they're building the confidence to be able to participate in those kind of things. So again, I say this, when I went to a musical, I go to the spring musicals. At Brockton High School, they're really, really quite amazing events. I feel like I'm at a Broadway show from everything I hear. Dartmouth is very much like that, in that you're really invested in music here and very proud of your music program, your band. Again, those are things that I share in common with you. But I went to see the production of Grease at Brockton High, and I was sitting in the audience, and 3 of my kids had the leads, and I always call them my kids because they were my kids, and they still were even as juniors and seniors, and I was just so incredibly proud of them and really validated that even though that work, I can't draw a straight line, but I can draw a line. And so that's really important. And by the way, I heard from your kids today, especially your high school students, that they want to see their superintendent in their schools, they want to see their superintendent in their classrooms, and they want to see their superintendent be a visible part of their school community.
Thank you. At this point, we've concluded our questions. If you'd like to take the next few minutes to make a closing statement, and if you wish to ask any questions of us.
I would, but before I make a closing statement, I again have to take a minute to thank all of you. Again, I enjoyed talking with you, really thoughtful questions. I also want to take time to thank your staff today. They were amazing, such a welcoming community. I had a couple of really great chauffeurs who took me around, and they were very kind to me, and again, really welcoming everybody. I have to tell you, there wasn't one person who wasn't warm and welcoming. Everyone from your security person at the window at the high school, your custodial staff, your tech staff, your lunch folks, just your teachers, your TAs, I hope I'm not forgetting anyone, because it was just your entire school community. I also want to talk about your students, because I want you to hear some of what they said. I did take notes while I was meeting with them, and part of what I loved, and educators here should feel really proud, because you've lent your voice to their voices, and they talked about Dartmouth as being a place where first I asked them what they want to see in their superintendent, and asked them what they thought a superintendent did, and they told me call snow days. So I thought that was very entertaining. I did give them a little bit more information about a superintendent and how they call a snow day, and I did tell them that teachers and leaders love snow days as well, so I wanted them to hear that. They wanted me to know that they want a superintendent that has a strong structure for leadership. These are coming from your students. Some of the questions they had for me very much rivaled your own. They wanted a superintendent that will be a guiding force of your school district. They want somebody who knows how to effectively make decisions. They want a superintendent who is well-liked and who is a good public figure. So those were some of the attributes that they named for your next superintendent. Then your principal, Mr. Shea, asked them to share with me why Dartmouth. They said things like this: they have talented teachers and administrators. There's dedication. They said Mr. Shea doesn't end school at 2:03. I saw that when I walked in today, where I can see that students are still here. They're participating in many school activities. They talked about feeling as if that there was justice for voice, and that this was a place of inclusion. Students can thrive and succeed. They talked about student voices. I loved this one, being loud and in a positive way, and that they feel that their voices are heard. Award-winning student shine. The students of color talked about how important it was that they have student groups in place right now to help to support them in their development here, and that they felt that there is room to make some tangible effect. And to make change. There's room to grow. They talked about the band being important. I'm sorry, it's just I have to give voice to some of what they shared. They said this is not just a school, this is a community. I thought that was really a powerful remark. They said everybody cares for one another. They want each other to succeed, but there's a lot of work to be done, which I thought was really important to hear from, the next generation of our leaders. I loved listening to one of the young people talk about the Women Empowerment Club and how they see that those kind of opportunities are really lending themselves to empowering student voice. They want to talk, and they want to see more inclusion, and they believe that those are the essential building blocks of your school district. So they had some really powerful statements, and they were incredibly articulate and supportive and respectful of one another, and that was really clear in the way they shared their remarks. So again, thank you to everybody involved. For me, I want to leave you with thinking, and hopefully I'll have a couple of questions for you. But I definitely hear not the concern, but the wonder about moving from a larger school district to a smaller one, and I can understand that. And what I would say to you is this: I'm at a point in my career right now where getting closer to students in the work of schools is really exciting to me, and Dartmouth offers that opportunity. You have about 3,500 students in your schools right now, and I can see that as being an opportunity for those kind of experiences to be really accessible as a superintendent, and that would be my expectation for myself. I also want you to know that I'm excited about this opportunity. I hope you can see that. You know, I have learned a lot about your community in the past couple of weeks, and today, and I also want to thank your team, by the way, that came to visit my team in Brockton. You were wonderful, and my team, I've to let your community know, talked about the kindness and respect that you showed them. And I want to thank your team for coming to Brockton and hearing about the work that I've done there. And I hope what you heard is really what builds upon the vision that you've built, because I do have your profile here and what your selection criteria is, and I'll just pull one out or one or two that says understands and recognizes good teaching. That's my favorite thing to do, is to walk into a classroom and see really good teaching going on, and I'm able to recognize it immediately. And success in creating a supportive work environment. I could go on, but you know, those are some of the bullets that I kind of pulled out that I think highlight some of the work that I've been able to do in 29 years, in a 29-year career. And I'm hoping to continue my career in a community like Dartmouth. I think it has, you know, a lot of things that would really allow me to grow in the next stage of my career, and at the same time grow your district.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Great.
Do you have questions for us?
Questions for us?
I guess I'd like to ask the same question that Mr. Shea asked his students. What do you hope for in your next superintendent? And I know this was your community profile, but now I'm asking you as individual school committee members.
Shannon, go ahead, you can start.
Oh, the pressure of being on the end. I have to go first here, I guess. You know, I think we have a school system that does a lot with a little. And so I would both like to see us continue to support and recognize the hard work that goes into the results that we have, but also the challenges to find us the resources that we need to support the people who are doing this important work, and to continue to grow on what positive things that we have here.
Great, thank you.
First and foremost, I would have to say visibility. I think visibility is huge, and you know, you spoke a little bit about how the students that you spoke to today really want to see their superintendent out and about, and you certainly alluded to being at theater shows, at games, and whatnot, but also around the community. You know, I think it's very important. We're at a time in which it's very clear that we need the support, we need the full support of the school committee, of the town, of our superintendent to really champion the school department and really bring that to the forefront of the town of Dartmouth, that we need to continue working together collaboratively with all of our stakeholders, including our select board and everyone at town hall, as well as our community. And I think that the superintendent of schools certainly has a big role in that, and I'm looking for someone to really shine a light on that. But certainly visibility for sure.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I think my thoughts are a little bit in line with Mr. Oliver, and I had the pleasure of visiting your district, and I think one thing that I heard loud and clear that I think would be of value to our community is what your staff had to say about the support that you gave them. I think one thing that stood out that I think would be of value here is, I'm not going to describe it, but I don't have the exact quote, but it was something to the effect of being seeing all staff and seeing all students and really valuing the work that they contribute. And I'm not articulating this well, but how your staff spoke so highly about the support that you have given them through the years, and so therefore how else could they respond to you potentially leaving your district, but then to support you and being that thought partner, being a thought partner, is that what?
I say that to them all the time.
And I just thought it was beautiful, and I think that sort of relationship building, collaborative thinking, and is something that would be a positive
Thank you.
contribution to this district.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think, just listening to my colleagues and pulling it together, we really need someone who can be a champion, for our teachers and our staff and for our students, to showcase, I love listening to Mr. Shea in a recent discussion where he said, there's no reason that Dartmouth High School and Dartmouth schools can't be the best, in the state and maybe even the nation. I love hearing that full vision. And I think it's very true and very apt because we have amazing people who work here and who stay here, are dedicated here. And we have a lot of people in our town who really, who love the schools. But I think the message really has to get out that in order to love and support the schools, it really means supporting these schools financially and, understanding that we're all benefiting from the schools as a community center, as, bringing, everything, our students, into the workforce and, celebrating the essence of Dartmouth. But we need someone, again, to be a public figure to really get that message out and get all the stakeholders together in the town, as I believe Mr. Oliver was saying, so that we can all be on the same page and understand that this is, this institution, these Dartmouth schools and our children, they are the center of us and the best of us, and we just need to make sure, again, we understand that that value needs to be paid for, and it's worth it, and our people are worth it, so.
Thank you.
The interesting part of going last is some things you write down and everybody asks and makes a statement about, and that's happened before, which is fine. But a couple of things that I have is number one is for someone who's going to be collaborative with the district type of deal, is going to show leadership in the district, and is going to be very transparent. The type of society that we are in nowadays, everything needs to be transparent. You never, unfortunately or fortunately, you never know when there's a camera on you or a hidden microphone or something of that nature. So, transparency, I think, is a big thing for me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So it's 7:10, so I still have 5 minutes. So I just have a couple things to say
Sure,
in
that's
response to that.
Okay, fine.
So just because I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'd like to respond to what you're saying, and what I heard first was does a lot with a little. I think I've talked a little bit about that this evening and how I've been able to do that, and at the same time be creative about finding ways to find resources. And what I would be excited about here in Dartmouth is I hear a team out there that's already doing that kind of thing. And so being able to kind of galvanize people in a way that we do that strategically would be work that I would be excited about. Visibility, I'm glad that you mentioned visibility because I did talk about school events, but I do think that it's important for a superintendent to be visible at more than school events. I didn't say that, but I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to actually address that, whether it was, as a principal, whether I'm going to Campello Business Association or going to legislative breakfasts or, doing some things that are not only within the community as far as visibility, but outside the community to be advocating for it, not only at the local level, but at the state level. And that's work that I'm really comfortable doing and have had really good support in doing that kind of work. I love that you talk about seeing and valuing, and thank you for talking about my colleagues. When I think about them, I get emotional. So that is something that I've said to them I say all the time. When you call me, I'm a thought partner. I'm not going to give you the exact right answer, but what I can do for you is talk through this issue and then give you advice, and somehow we can come to some common understanding how we might at least attempt to solve a real problem. And then champion, I love that you brought up Mr. Shea and his willingness and excitement about making Dartmouth High School and the Dartmouth Public Schools the best, not only in the state, but in the country, and that he has that vision. And helping a principal and principals and your school community to be able to do that would give me no greater joy. I'm not a person who needs to have, all of the attention. I love to give people the resources and sort of the inspiration to take their own dreams and to run with them. And I think you have real potential here. And at the same time, what you said about getting the message out, yes, schools need to be supported. resources need to be there. You can do more with less, but at some point, doing too much more with less does burn people out, and then it can create some problems that you may not have foreseen and affect the experiences that the children in this community and the students, older students, are having in your classrooms. Teachers are important. We need to support them in lots of different ways, and certainly I understand exactly what you mean about being a champion as a superintendent, being out there and talking about that. And then Mr. Nunes, thank you so much. Collaborative, show leadership, transparency. I believe those are all hallmarks of my leadership, and I would be really excited to be the superintendent in the Dartmouth Public Schools and to be able to showcase those leadership attributes that I've gained over almost 29 years. June 30th. All right. So thank you so much. I've enjoyed being here in your community. For all your community members that I met today, thank you so much. You've been amazing, so welcoming, and I cannot in any way thank you enough for the day I had in your community. So thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you.
At this point in time, we are going to recess until 7:35. It is 7:35, and we will reconvene superintendent search, our finalist interview. Number 2, we have Dr. Andrea Schwab, who's the assistant superintendent in Wareham. Before we begin, Doc, just one, there is a Google form on the district website on the candidates that Mr. Kiley has compiled and put out there, so anyone who, has the time and wherewithal, we'd appreciate it if you could take a look at it as the interviews are done, and kindly, get it filled out by 5 o'clock Friday night so that we can, what did I didn't even turn it on. There we go. Okay, let me start that again. Hi, good evening. Force of habit, I apologize. There is a Google form on the website that Dr. Kiley, Mr. Kiley put together, and on the candidates, and we're asking anyone who can to take a look at it, and please fill it out by 5 o'clock Friday night so that he can get everything compiled and forwarded to us for our meeting on Monday night. So we'll do that. This is, as I said, this is Dr. Andrea Schwab. Welcome. Good evening and welcome to Dartmouth. I'd like to open this interview by asking the committee members to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Shannon Jenkins. I've been on the school committee for, I think, 2 terms now, maybe a little less than Mr. Oliver. And I work at UMass Dartmouth.
Nice to see you again.
Good evening, Chris Oliver, Dartmouth School Committee. I think this is my 10th year. I have a junior over here at Dartmouth High School, and I work for the Bourne Public Schools.
Nice to see you again as well.
Nice to see you.
Hi, Kathleen Amaral. I'm concluding my 2nd term on the school committee, and a parent.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, my name is Mary Waite. Thank you. My name is Mary Waite. I am a parent and also have a background in teaching and education at the high school level. And I have 2 boys who are now freshmen and juniors at Dartmouth High, and my daughter just graduated last year, is in college.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm John Nunes. I'm the chairman of the committee. I've been here 33 years, almost, and I'm a retired director of financial service and treasurers for a number of municipalities in the Commonwealth. I'm a 1971 graduate of Dartmouth High School, and we have 2 boys who went through the system.
And it's nice to see you.
Pleasure. Pleasure is mine, ma'am.
Again and again.
Thank you.
It was a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you. Our format this evening consists of 3 parts. We invite you to make an opening statement. After that, we have a series of prepared questions we will ask, and we will close by listening to any comments you wish to make and allow you an opportunity to ask us questions. We have 75 minutes scheduled for this interview. We have each had an opportunity to review all your application material. We would appreciate it if you would take the next few minutes to further introduce yourself to us.
Well, I will say my name again. It's Andrea Schwam. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of the Wareham Public Schools. I am currently in my 9th year in that position. Prior to that, I was a principal and an assistant principal at the same school for another 9 years, I believe. And before that, an assistant principal, special education team chair, and a teacher. And in each of the positions, I thought I would always be in each of them and never move to the next level. So I always surprise myself as I've moved through and learned a great deal about life in school and the complexities that that brings. I'm excited to be here. I had a very full day with many talented staff members, and I enjoyed every moment. And hopefully one of your questions will allow me to elaborate on that, so I don't want to take your thunder from your questions. But it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that my cheat sheet? Oh. Okay, thank you.
So I have the first question. I'm interested in how you use research about educational practice to support your decision-making processes. For instance, recent research provides suggestions as to appropriate amounts of homework for different grade levels and how school start times affect academic performance. Can you describe how you stay current with research into educational best practices and give us an example of how you've used research to guide policy changes in your past positions?
Well, research, we were just having this conversation actually earlier today, how the importance of valid research and being very careful about what it is that you choose to read and invest in as you analyze and assess certain programs or policies or procedures that you are going to implement. Because the real research or the deep research comes from a vast review, really. You can't just depend on one person's insight on that and then go. You need to look at it very carefully. And what was most valuable about my dissertation research was the process, not necessarily the outcome. That process taught me how important it was to really dig in and make good decisions about how we proceed, rather than just the most popular decision, or a decision that someone may have written about adequately well, but didn't really investigate more deeply about the impact or effect it might have on students. So I'm careful about not being a consumer and more about being a researcher. And I want to make sure that whatever it is that we're deciding to do has been vetted appropriately. So I look at many different viewpoints, and many different articles will often go on sites that I know are more relevant. I'll talk to professors or other researchers that I know are in the field. And this is true even with surveys. So often surveys are given out haphazardly or quickly without thinking about the possible biases that might be involved in asking certain questions or the answers that you're looking for in those. So we partner in Wareham, for example, with an organization called MCIEA that gives a school quality measure survey, and that was developed by University of Mass Lowell professors. And interpreting that research is complicated, so it's my job to give the survey and then find a way in which it can be interpreted effectively so that people can understand it. But it's not easy because there are 5 questions per certain topic, and it's been vetted properly, and it's gone through the process. So I take it pretty seriously because we're dealing with our children, and they're extremely important. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. And so it's not just about a math program that looks pretty or a literature program that has the best covers, right? It's about what's underneath all of that. And what was really fascinating was I was an adjunct at Bridgewater State University, and they hired me to teach a class called Teacher as Researcher. And that's the least loved required class, I think, of Masters of Education teachers in the field. And I knew that going in. So what was really interesting about that was helping teachers see how important it was for them to look more deeply at the different practices and programs that they were asked to investigate. So it's important, for sure.
Can you tell the committee about a great decision that you made, and likewise one that you probably should not have? And what did you learn?
So I'll start with the bad news first and the good news after. And I said this in the interview as well, in the initial interview, so excuse me if it's redundant, but there's a famous educator, and I won't say their name, but they've published a lot of work. And I went to a conference and saw that this person had a rigorous educational initiative that was happening, and I was brand new in the district. And I thought, wow, it would be really great to have this certain vendor come in and do some research and help our staff with rigorous education, because that was one of the biggest issues that we were having, at least initially, was offering a rigorous experience. And so I received a grant, because most of my work is dependent on grants, and so I received a grant and implemented this person's group to come in, and it was probably one of the worst experiences that my teachers had to endure. And it was not just a one-shot deal. It was for a couple of years, and it was planned, and so on and so forth. And so it was a huge mistake, because teachers were actually in that PD, and they were not happy about being in that professional development. So that was a mistake, and I owned it, completely owned it, and apologized, probably still apologizing for it today. But it was not a great decision on my part, and I probably should have investigated it further before that decision was made. One of the most successful, well, there are a few things, but I'll talk about early literacy, and I spoke to the students about that today as well, the high school students. Our students were in a lot of trouble. They were 60% below the norm at the end of kindergarten after we measured in their reading acquisition. And if students can't read, then they can't attend to grade level expectations. So I was pretty nervous about that. So it's my first year, and I'm looking at this data, and I'm thinking, what are we going to do? How are we going to help these kids? And you can't practice an RTI model in the way that it was presented back then, and be fiscally responsible with 60% of your population. You just can't. And so, fortunately, I happened on a trip to China with the College Board, looking at schools there, and I met a superintendent from Maine, who knew of a woman who was a special education director who had then segued into some brain research on reading. And so what she professed was that the right and left hemisphere need to be stimulated in students through movement, which then builds the corpus callosum, which is the superhighway between both hemispheres. And you need both in order to read effectively. You can't just, it's a science, and don't confuse that with the science of reading, although there are some great elements to that, but I don't want to get off on that track at the moment, because that's a big discussion right now. But the idea was to build our students' capacity through intentional literacy initiatives, as well as to also build their capacity in their brain. Because the exposure to certain elements that are necessary for that to be developed were not being developed with our particular population. And so, amazingly, we tracked them, and in a short time, they were actually able to do the things necessary to become good readers. And then as I looked at them throughout time, so I was able to track them from the time they started until third grade, for example. That same group in September, when they entered third grade, was at 79% at and above the norm in reading. And it was a huge sense of relief that we had actually found something that could change the entire life of a student's experience in school.
Thank you, ma'am.
I have the next question. While we are all committed to ensuring the best education for Dartmouth's children and our school personnel do a lot with a little, financial resources in the town are modest, to say the least. Given these financial limitations will only be exacerbated by the ending of our federal ESSER funding and a very bleak Chapter 70 proposed budget, what types of creative ideas might you suggest to meet the educational needs of all our students, from those who need special education supports as part of an IEP plan to those who are ready for accelerated instruction that are not being met within the current budget and programs?
That's a very big question. So correct me if I don't answer all of the parts of that question. But in the current district that I'm in, it's bleak, always. And I think this is a common theme in every district, because we're asked to do more with the same or less than what we came into. And as I just mentioned to the soon-to-be president of the Mass Association of Superintendents, who's speaking quite eloquently, I would say, in support of our students at the state level, I basically said to her that ESSER was a blessing and a curse in some ways, because what ESSER provided us with the funding that we've always needed. It wasn't extra like it's touted as, right? It's made us say, oh, good, we can actually receive the need. We can actually attend to the needs of our students in the way that they've needed for a very long time. And so that being said, we now have schools that have some money to actually attend to students that will no longer be here by the close of the next year. So that creates the fiscal cliff, and that is a big concern across the state, I would assume, with a lot of districts. And the question is, I think the central office team is, do you cut now partially, or do you wait, and do you make those cuts later? Will the millionaire's tax help us better in the next following the year? Will that change? I was not happy when I saw the cherry sheet for your district. We made out really well as a result, and it's kind of interesting that you didn't, because your population needs support, just generally speaking. If you look at the Title I allocations, for example, you have a significant amount of funding that addresses the needs in your district, whereas other districts like Weston or Wellesley don't receive that funding, right? Because they don't have the population necessary to be allocated that funding. So I was obviously disappointed that you didn't get some relief from that. So I think what I would initially do is listen really carefully to the schools, the leaders, the teachers, the counselors, the paraprofessionals, all of the people that work with our students. Look carefully at the special education population. I know that you're opening up an 18 to 22 school program for the high school, which is really exciting. Everyone can benefit from that experience. But it's really looking closely at what's happening, all of the intricacies that make up Dartmouth Public Schools, all of the people that work with the students, and listen carefully to what it is that they need and what they feel as though they must have, and then be very transparent about what's available. And I don't think any one person should make the decision, but I think it should be a collaborative decision based on all of those discussions over, I would say, over this next year.
As a 10-year member of the Dartmouth School Committee, I have seen several different leadership styles come through the superintendent's office. Please describe your specific leadership style and how you will apply it to the Dartmouth Public Schools.
Theoretically speaking, I'm a servant leader. Of all of the theories, and there are a lot of them that describe leaders, that's the one that resonates most with me. I'm here to serve. There is nothing that I wouldn't do to be part of the team. Every job is my job. So I don't delineate based on position as to what I should or shouldn't do. I do what's necessary to be a member of a team. I'm also I would say, emotionally intelligent. So I know myself really well, which helps when I'm listening to people, because I also then can translate that out to understanding other people really well. Because you have to go in before you can actually understand what's happening externally. And so along with that, I also have worked consciously on listening skills since I was very young, because it's helped me a great deal in understanding the world and understanding what's surrounding me and how to then navigate those certain situations. And I learn best when I'm collaborating with people who trust me, because then they have the courage to say what's really on their mind, and they're less likely to be nervous about speaking up because of the position. But that takes time. So we've built some phenomenal teams based on trust in the district that I'm currently in. And I would say that that's been demonstrated, not necessarily measured, but demonstrated by comments that have happened just by accident. So I'll give you an example. One of our school committee members went to all of our schools and visited classrooms. So he spent a day in each school. And he came back to meet with myself and the superintendent to discuss his experience and what it was like and what he learned and all of that. And he said, what I want to say is that I felt incredibly welcomed to every classroom that I went into. That there was the warmth and openness that I did not experience 10 years ago. And he pointed his finger at me and so it's that, just that one comment. I don't think he even understood what it meant, right? But it's the idea that you can build something fantastic when you allow or you have that ability to then incorporate all that's been said to you and demonstrate that you've heard what's been said. So we're all in it for the same reason, which is for our kids.
So you touched upon a little bit about the follow-up question, but how will you utilize your team's strengths to move the district forward while keeping what is working in place?
Well, I need to get to know people a little bit more. I did meet many today, briefly, I would say. And it was a great experience. So what you have now are a lot of people who are fairly new in their positions, and they're really smart. And it seems as though they know what they're doing. They all connected with kids. They all seem to have that hope of contributing to the life of the district and the students that are here. And that seemed to be a priority for them. So that it will be easy for me to work with people who believe in our kids. So I would be excited about the opportunity to delve in there and work with them as a group.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I believe I have the next question. So independent auditors have cited Dartmouth's lack of focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion as an area that needs improvement. How would you provide leadership to address DEI within the district?
Well, I spoke with students who were very concerned about DEI actually today. And I assume actually I was told there was a committee that had originally formed. So that's, I think, important to look at that. Really important. And I'm in a class now that's offered by the Mass Association of Superintendents. So it's superintendents, assistant superintendents from across the state in a pretty rigorous course on DEI overall. I'm reading a book that has a pretty provocative title called Me and White Supremacy, which offers a lot of insight into our culture and how we how we've sort of all been inundated with a certain way of being, that sometimes we're not even aware of that because of who we are and how we were brought up and those elements. And so I'm learning a lot from that, but I'm also finding that even in policies, many policies, there are times where we can celebrate that a lot more often than we actually do. For an example, I've been on this policy subcommittee for 9 years, working in concert with school committee members and administrators, parents, and so forth. And one of the elements that came up was that when we are referring to anyone, we're using he and she, for example. And so that was brought up. We need to change that in all of our policies to be more inclusive, for example. Equity in education is another policy. Library and media materials was another policy. There are a lot of policies out there that I think we can take a look at and decide on how we want to change the language in that with the help of the committee and review of those policies. But I think it's extremely important that my belief is that it's about access to academic rigor for all students. And that's sometimes difficult for people to understand how to wrap their head around it. So we have the International Baccalaureate program that was brought in and we were approved in 2017 as a way to stimulate some growth in our high school enrollment. And we just passed a course offering that's inclusive IB for language and literature is the name of the class. It's essentially an English class. And the committee vote on that was a 3-4, one opposed, and 1 abstention. So it was passed. But it would have been really great to have a 5 pass, right? A 5 yes on a class like that, because essentially what we're saying is a course like that should be available to all students. It shouldn't be segmented out or just given to certain ones and not others based on whether they're special education or whether they've been tracked throughout their time in school and all of those things that sort of put kids in certain places as they move through school life. And so when I talked about the early literacy, for example, if I can somehow make sure that a huge percentage of our kids have everything they need to read well, then there's no reason in the world why they can't have access to the rigor that we're offering and have that same dynamic experience in their education life that other students, right, have. So there are many ways to look at it. I look at it through an academic lens because we're schools, and I think it's really important that we do so. But high expectations with a high level of support are needed. So we have a IB teacher partnering with the special education teacher to create the course for next year with the help of IB. So, sure.
So I have the next question. I know there are state mandates around evaluation, but I want to try to dig deeper into the question of evaluation to ask you what sorts of examples you would offer for effective evaluation processes for teachers and administrators that actually work to improve performance and motivate personnel as opposed to being an exercise in checking boxes. And can you talk about how you engage school personnel in the evaluation process collaboratively so it's seen as a means to improve practice as opposed to a punitive process?
Sure. When I arrived in Wareham, in our contract, we have an evaluation subcommittee. The teacher's contract requires us to meet as an evaluation subcommittee. And at my first meeting, there must have been 30 members there, 30 different people at that meeting, very upset about the evaluation. They claimed it was a gotcha tool and that it wasn't really being done in the spirit of the tool itself. And so we began to work on what we needed to do to make it a collaborative tool so that people could grow So one of the first areas that I wanted to address was sort of like your core beliefs. Assume that everyone wants to be exemplary when you walk into their room. Don't assume other than that. And then you work backward from there. So we started there, and then we also started to have many meetings collaborating on what do you consider exemplary, proficient, needs improvement, so forth. So we looked at that, and we continue to do that. We continue to calibrate because we need to know that English and math and science and social studies and all the different subject areas are sort of around the same pace when they're evaluating. And we're very fortunate because our evaluators, our department chairs in particular, are part of the teachers union. And that won't probably happen anywhere else in the universe. But it works where we are in that we have them, they teach a couple of classes, and then they have a smaller caseload of people they evaluate that are in their subject area that they go in often and continually walk through and have conversations and offer help and assistance and whatever else anyone might need as they're teaching. So it's been remarkable what's happened. Now I beg people to be on my evaluation subcommittee because no one wants to come anymore. Everyone's pretty happy with it. So it was just an example of some of the things that have worked. I meet with department chairs regularly. We talk about best practices. I share anything that I find that might be worth taking a look at. We look at a lot of data. We teach teachers to look at their data, and rather than be threatened by that data, look at ways in which they can improve their instruction as a result of that data. And we look at multiple forms of data, so it's not just one area. We look at many different areas, and then we also look at what might be affecting students' lives and what could be in the way of them accessing their education, and then try to find ways in which we can help them better. So it's been quite amazing because everything has changed it's quite remarkable, really, what's happened. And I would say that it's the team, all of us working together, that's made that happen.
My turn. Can you tell us what your goals are for the first 6 months in Dartmouth? And as a follow-up, what do you believe would be needed to complete these goals?
I think collaboration with the school committee is key with designing your goals and having a conversation around those goals would be instrumental in formulating goals that could be measurable and worthy of your priorities, as well as the priorities that I think would be important. And those would be developed after I spend a lot of time meeting and listening to people. I guess you could call it a listening tour with all the various stakeholders. Questions that I would need some great answers to so that we could then begin to see what is needed. I know on the first interview, I asked the question about what was important to the people, at least those 15, I think, that were on the committee. There were a lot of people there. And some of the things that they brought up were culture, facilities, social emotional learning, academics. So those were, and DEI. Those were important elements. I have them by rote. I think they're important goals, and it will be really imperative for me to focus on those areas because it was a mixed group from all different areas of the schools that was on that committee. So I would want to learn more about what they mean because it was at the end and I think we were running out of time. And so I couldn't really press, right? But I would want to press on that and learn more about what they actually meant and then figure out how to gather information on those things that were brought up at the meeting.
Thank you, ma'am.
So every school district is unique, and Dartmouth is certainly different than Wareham. How do you see the role of superintendent in Dartmouth, and what attracts you to this community?
What initially attracted me most about the community was that it was very similar to Falmouth, and I spent a significant amount of time in Falmouth, and I was very close to families there. I was able to really make connections that I'm still connected, right? So, and I've watched their children from that point grow and go to college and have birthdays and so forth, and become successful overall. And I missed the connect to families that I thought was really important as we teamed together to help their children. In Wareham, it isn't quite as intimate as that. So it was very attractive to me to be in a similar community. The way you have your schools laid out and that they all sort of filter in at the same time to the middle school. We talked a little bit about that transition today at the middle school. What's that like? That was really important to me as a principal because I had 4 schools that were segmented out pretty demographically speaking, you know, so that I could then figure out how to best serve each of those students as they came, because it's scary for kids to move from their neighborhood school into a big school, right? So there were a lot of different plans that I put in place, and I believe a lot of my experiences there, as well as now my experience with central office, could be replicated in Dartmouth in many of the positive events that have happened throughout my career as a result. So it feels familiar and comfortable for me to be in a community like Dartmouth.
Thank you.
I guess I've got the last couple here. Dr. Schwab, how visible are you at school events such as athletic games, band shows, theater performances, etc.?
We are not Dartmouth in Wareham. I would love to be visible at all of the events that are coming up, but so I have attended plays and the music programs that have happened most recently. We have a pretty dynamic music teacher at the middle school, for example. She's maybe in her 4th year, so she's built up quite a great band and chorus. So I'm at those events, art shows. So I've attended those events, but not necessarily all of the sporting events. Not to say that I wouldn't, because I would, but the superintendent often attended those, and so I sort of stayed in my lane where I belonged at the time. But I know we just did win the state championship for basketball, so I just wanted to mention that, which was a wonderful event for us, because I think the last time we won was 2010. So I have enlisted students, however, in the places where I work hard, which is in the strategic planning, for example. So our students created the logo for the plan, they created the tagline for the plan, they were highly engaged in analyzing that plan and asking questions around that, and that's how I've really engaged the student population, at least for now. And we surveyed all students, which was pretty cool, through the whole district, and voted on the logo and the tagline for our plan. So that was a dynamic process. And I am not opposed to listening to great music and seeing great games. So.
And the last question I have is, can you talk about how you've been working on the social, emotional issues of students as we come out of the COVID pandemic?
Yes. However, we have been working on these issues for a long time prior to the pandemic. So social emotional health has been a priority for I think, many schools for a lot longer than just the pandemic, although the pandemic brought extra stress and anxiety and trauma and all of the above. We have kids that are suffering for a number of reasons. And so we started by, I could give you the list, but we went to the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence initially. We then joined PBIS initiative through the University of Connecticut, and that was through a grant. Also, grant paid for the attendance to this Emotional Intelligence Center at Yale. We've done book groups with Mark Brackett, who's the head of that. He wrote a book called Permission to Feel. We implement the mood meter, which is also part of his initiative. We've had Responsive Classroom. Polly Bath has come for a year and spoke to our groups at their half days during the time. And overall, we've hired more social workers, guidance counselors, adjustment counselors. We have partnerships with High Point, Gosnold. They come in and do other work with social emotional learning. We used to have a school that was closed called the West Wareham Academy that was for substantially separate students who suffered from social emotional disabilities. And we are looking at that again as a possibility to help some of our kids, because when the school closed, they needed to go somewhere. And so they're in, and we're not clinicians. So we've hired a group called Effective School Solutions to come in, at least initially, to the high school to begin to, we have two clinicians that are experts at understanding the elements of what our kids need. And we've started that work last spring and into the summer. We had many conversations with this group because we really need to care for our students that are suffering. So we've done a lot of work in that area. We still have a long way to go, I believe. We also worked with staff because the pandemic caused our staff to also suffer trauma and anxiety and a number of other issues. So we're working it, and we hope that whatever direction we're going in will be effective in how we proceed. So.
Thank you very much. That concludes our prepared questions for this evening. We'd like you, if you'd like to take the next few minutes to make a closing statement, and if you wish, ask questions of us. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say that today was, I learned a great deal about your district by traveling around and meeting all of the leaders and teachers, students. The high school students were fantastic. They were not easy on me, which is great. They asked some really important questions, and I really enjoyed that process a great deal. They asked me about what I would do to enlist more voice. Did I have any ideas about that? And I think a lot about that, having a subcommittee or a student-run committee to meet with the superintendent. For a number of reasons. I think it's important for them to understand all of the complexities of school life. I think it would be helpful for them as they move on in their careers to understand those complexities, because they're in business and wherever else they want to go, they need to know what's necessary, but also to talk to them about what they need and how I can be a voice for them to you, to the committee, because they specifically asked about that. Like I said before, I'm excited about the 18 to 22 program that you have explored and are looking at. That'll be beneficial to everyone. You have a new math program that is quite dynamic in the district for elementary school, and what stood out for me was, and I can't remember now, and I apologize to anyone who's out there that I don't remember, but they were talking about going in to evaluate or looking at one of the courses and seeing the conversation between students and how they were actually talking about and using academic language to discuss math. And I thought, that's heaven, right, to me. So there's that. Then I saw, of course, the media studio, and I saw all the awards for the different music and other. It was pretty incredible. The music program is amazing throughout the district. You can tell that it's a priority and really important here. And you put your money where your mouth is with that, with the people that you have to support the program, from elementary all the way up through. I was hugged today by a student, which was great, but I also found out that he hugged the other candidate, so I was like, oh man, I thought it was just for me, but that's fine. It was fun. And just overall, it was a wonderful day, and I really want to thank you for that, everyone for that. It's not easy to coordinate. So I know, because when you came to Wareham, it was not easy to coordinate either, so I understand, and I had to go to a lot more places. So I just want to thank you for that. Question that I have for the committee is, what are your main priorities for the relationship with you and the superintendent, and the work that you believe needs to be done?
Okay, you want me to, I'll start this time,
Okay.
okay?
Awesome.
How's that? I've got 3 that I wrote down, and one is being collaborative, leadership, and being transparent, especially in this day and age where everyone has cameras and microphones. Sometimes that's good, most times it's not, type of deal, personal opinion, but someone who's going to be collaborative with the group, with everyone, who is going to be, show effective leadership, top down type of deal, and be able to delegate and such, and again, as I said, transparent.
Excellent.
Okay. So again, I think to, jump back onto the concept of leadership, and looking forward, is that we need someone who can bring together all the stakeholders. And, especially when we think about stakeholders, I'm not just, of course, our parents and our school community, but as we get into this difficult financial reality, we need someone that can really shepherd the schools through this and convey our needs and the central importance of the schools in the district to our families, and so that they understand that we may have to look at, some challenges, whether it be cuts or, possibly an override, and we need someone who really can be the face of that to really, again, to get everyone on the same page, to support our schools, see how important and essential our students are, in this town, and to prioritize that so that we don't have to make so many difficult decisions. We know we will make many, but so that we can still make sure that they receive the best education we can provide for them, and launch them as, proud graduates of Dartmouth. So that's what I'd like to see.
It just dawned on me, we're all kind of saying similar thing. There's, an underlying tone of, I would like to see something you spoke about, like just the listening, that active listening and being reflective and building relationships with all of the folks in our community, our educators, and just building that trust and building a sense of all staff feeling valued and respected, and I think that's really important.
So I have some notes here. Visibility is really important. I know Mr. Nunes spoke about that earlier, visibility at events, but visibility, all over the town, whether it's school events, whether it's attending finance committee meetings, town halls, select board meetings, or just being out in the community and engaging our community stakeholders. That's certainly important for me, along with championing the school district, right? As the superintendent of schools, I feel as though, one of the top priorities is to really put your best foot forward on behalf of our staff here and on behalf of our students to really, show everyone what the Dartmouth Public Schools is all about and where the taxpayers' money is going. And that's certainly important. And really, for me, and this is specifically coming from my opinion, I'm looking for someone who is a leader who is kind and compassionate. I can certainly work with someone who has other faults or someone who may misstep in the process, because no one's perfect and we're all learners, right? We're all if you're in education, we're learning every day. But if you're not a kind and compassionate person, that's someone that I'm going to have a hard time working with. So to me, first and foremost, above everything else, that's really important to me.
I'm glad you said that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll follow up with what Mr. Oliver said. That kindness and compassion is part of a partnership, and thinking about that relationship with the school committee. I know that sometimes relationships on school committees or with the superintendent can be fraught. We disagree on a lot of things, but I think we all work together because we respect each other and we know that we're here at the table for what's right for our students and for what's right for the people who work in this district. And so I think we all want someone who will be open and honest in a partnership with us. You have to be visible into the community, but we are visible in the community as well as your eyes and ears. And so building that partnership and that trust with us, I think, is really important. And then I'll also just reiterate, I think for me, this is only the second time I think I've been in a hiring decision in the superintendent, but it is the most important duty of the school committee, because all of the people who attend our schools, all of the people who work for these schools are going to have to work under the superintendent's leadership. And so for me, I think kindness, compassion, treating people right, and working in partnership are the biggest priorities for me.
All right, excellent. I have my notes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. It was great meeting all of you, seeing you all again.
Good, thank you. Just so you're aware, we have one more interview Wednesday night. The committee will then take all this information and kind of process it through over a couple of days, and we have a regularly scheduled meeting next Monday night, and at that point in time, we will be making a decision on the finalists for who we would like to appoint as the superintendent.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to hearing from you, and enjoy your evening, the rest of it.
Thank you. You
Thank
also,
you.
ma'am. Have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you again.
Thank you.
The winner goes.
That's the people support.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Do you want me to give the update, or
Huh?
do you want me to wait for folks to open, or to give an update?
You're good. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so,
Because she has them alphabetically.
gosh, when was it?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago,
Actually, no, not even. It was
the committee met on a dreary Saturday. We spent the whole day at central office, and I just wanted to, if I could, just thank the committee.
I'm sorry, did you say what the committee was for?
Oh, no, well, this is for the Pupil Support Services Administrator Interview Committee, and it was made up of 11 folks. So it was myself and Mr. Martin. He is not here. So he was here, but I don't think he's here anymore. and myself, Mr. Martin, Mr. Nunes,
Mr. Tebow,
Mr. Tebow,
Ms. Thomas was there.
yes, Ms. Thomas.
Steph Mello,
Yep, Mark Hayes.
Mark Hayes,
Caitlin Kobach, Sandra Alpom Raposa.
a couple of parents.
Yeah, we had Lisa Simmons, parent, and who am I missing? Christine Matias, another parent. And so we interviewed 6 people
Yep.
on that day. And it was, I think it was it felt like it was, I'm trying to look at, it was a great process. I think Mr. Martin really led the group. I was co-chair, but offered us an opportunity to, independently rate, confidentially rate, and feel that comfortable in being quite clear about what we thought individually. And they were, at the end of that day, tallied. The group deliberated a little bit, and we actually brought up potential of bringing forth 4 candidates, similar to what was done for the superintendency. And the overarching thought was, no, we're going to put forth 3 candidates for consideration for the school committee to deliberate on. And as you can see, in the 9th hour, you have them in alphabetical order, we had someone drop out. And Mr. Martin and the committee was quite efficient, and we alerted, those who made the cut, and we also alerted those who were not selected. And so here we are, bringing this to the committee as to how to proceed. We have so to be clear, we have 2 candidates as finalists, and we as a committee interview 2? Do we go back to our search committee? I don't, and how do we proceed? So you have them in front of you, and do you want me to share who they are, or do you want to?
No, go ahead. You got it.
Okay. And so making sure I'm doing them alphabetically. So the 2 finalists are Gloria Dionisio and Lori Jodoin. Oh, my goodness. I butchered it.
Jody.
Yes,
Jody.
Joyden. And so they are the 2 that you have. Like I said, we had a 3rd candidate who let us know that he was, he selected another position in another district. So that's my update.
Well, thank you for all your work, to the both of you and to Mr. Martin for co-chairing. Being on the superintendent's screening committee, I have no doubt that it was a lot of work and spent a lot of time, especially on a Saturday, so.
We lucked out in the sense that it was, a dreary
It was
day.
raining,
So,
it was a dreary day.
we weren't sitting there going, man, I could be getting lawn work done or something, so.
Right.
We got that.
So I guess, at least from my point of view, what are you asking us for right now? Are
No,
you asking us on whether or not to,
No,
you're not asking us anything?
no,
Okay.
no.
I'll let you talk,
because-
Doc.
Thank you. Now, Kathleen and Mike and I had a long conversation last Thursday on this type of deal, and kind of came to the consensus. Number one, there was no time to try and figure out how we, to fix or to try and get a 3rd candidate.
Yep.
With notifying those that had succeeded and those that had not, to go back to the number 4 person was going to be like, oh yeah, great, I didn't make the first cut, now you want me in, type of deal. I've been in that position that I've had to do that, and it's not a pretty sight. So we decided to go with, these 2 candidates, just so that everyone is aware these are both candidates of both employees of the Dartmouth Public School system type of deal. So the next thing that we need to do as a committee, okay, just to move this process along, is to figure out an interview schedule for these candidates, okay? The question has been raised by a couple of people, you know, do you want a quote-unquote subcommittee? So for discussion purposes, just, you know, do you want Kathleen and I and a couple of other people to interview the candidates and make a decision, or do we, as a school committee, want to do those interviews?
Well, there's
Go
two
ahead.
separate things you said there. Do the interviews and make a decision. Under Mass General Law, it's the full school committee that makes that decision.
Right.
Not just the subcommittee.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
So I was
Just making sure.
Yep, I just, you know, that was approached to me and that, so I was just making that known. So,
Mr. Nunes?
Yep.
Also for consideration is like timeline. Obviously, we're going to move ahead and we're going to make a decision on superintendent prior to bringing this back. Is that what we're also going to be thoughtful about?
well, the question that I have of the committee is, when do you want to put these interviews in place? Do we want to, because we need 48 hours to post this as a meeting. So do we want to do something, do we want to interview these candidates? I don't know what anybody's schedule is this Thursday night.
I can do that.
Would we like to do this Thursday night? Okay, that's number one. The other option we have is, we do have the budget hearing next Monday at 6:35 as part of our scheduled school committee meeting type of deal. Do we want to start the school committee meeting at 5:30 and get everything, for the most part, off the agenda, have the hearing the budget hearing at 6:35, and somewhere around 7 o'clock, start the interviews with these two candidates? Because we also in there have to have a discussion about the superintendent's position. So, those are, go right ahead. I'm open to any and all suggestions.
So so let's go back to the superintendent for a minute. Is it the expectation of the chair and of the rest of the committee that we're going to make a decision that night on the superintendent?
Yes, we are.
Okay, that's what I thought. I'm fine either way as far as opening it up for interviews for the special education director.
Well, Chris and also, opening it how? Having them Thursday or going later in the meeting on Monday night?
On Monday.
Okay.
I would prefer it on Monday, but that's
You would
just me.
prefer on Monday? Okay, that's fine. Shannon?
So I'll just note for poor Miss Amaral, who also has an event tomorrow night, I believe is candidate night, that perhaps we might give her one night home with her family. That's also my personal preference, to not have 4 events, school committee events in 1 week. So I would prefer Monday. I mean, ultimately though, if we have too much on our agenda on Monday,
We can make it.
I don't see any reason why we couldn't interview, Tuesday or
No,
Wednesday of
that's,
next week too.
it does not work, because I've got teacher negotiations Tuesday.
Okay.
And then Chris and I have a SMEC budget hearing
Okay.
meeting Wednesday.
Okay.
And then Thursday, Mr. Kiley has to present everything to the finance committee.
Okay, so then
So
my
next week
preference would
is
be,
shot to smithereens.
my preference would be Monday of next
Okay.
week.
All right, we'll go Monday.
I have no preference.
Yeah,
I'll defer.
okay. All right, so can we start, is everybody available to start the meeting at 5:30 on Monday?
Yes.
Does that work?
Yes.
And then I'll work with Mr. Kiley and Ms. Gunther on the agenda. I'll have Ms. Gunther get a hold of the two candidates. Mr. Kiley will set the time for the interviews, and we'll go from there. The only other thing we have to if we can get some questions to Ms. Gunther for the candidates so that she can coordinate them and we'll be good to go. Does that work for people? We can get them to her by Friday? And she can put them in
Friday
the
should
packet?
work, sure.
Okay, great. Kate, are you good with that? Perfect, thank you, ma'am, much appreciated. Go ahead.
May I ask just
Sure.
about procedure on Monday?
Yep.
So when we, just because again, this is my first go-around through this, will we be coming in, all of us with a decision, or will we be discussing each of the candidates at that? Like, I'm just like trying to understand like how that procedure will work on Monday, like as far as, again, I'm thinking more the school committee members
Yep.
now. Again, of course, we're all going to be assimilating all of this information, but are we just saying like, this is our choice? And why, or are we just saying this is our choice?
It can go any which way you wish it to go, okay? Everybody can have open dialogue. I like Dr. Schwarm, I like Dr. McGuire, I like they were all good candidates and that type of deal.
Okay.
And then,
Okay.
when we exhaust our conversation, we will take a vote.
Okay.
We will kind of then, recess for 5 minutes and either Mr. Oliver or Dr. Jenkins, who are on that committee, can go make that wonderful phone call to them.
Great. And then I guess my other question is, if we interview these other folks on Monday,
Yeah.
when would we then make that decision? If again, the rest of the week is, full,
Yeah.
and just anticipating that the election is Tuesday?
The election's to follow.
Yeah, so I'm just, again, I'm just,
Yeah, no, the
I'm being
election.
like midnight judges here, but I just wanted to.
I would, if at all possible, and my thought is, make the decision that night. We did it the last time.
We
When
can do it that
hired-
night?
When
Okay.
we did it, when we hired Ms. Townsend, we did it that night.
Yeah, we
Okay.
did.
Okay.
Chris?
Yeah, I said, yeah, we did.
Yeah, we hired
Okay.
that night, so.
So they will potentially, we'll speak with them, we'll do the superintendent, and then we'll come back, I'm just curious, again, trying to wrap my mind around how that will look.
Yeah,
Will we
well-
do it immediately after the interviews, or will we have a kind of a recess to process, or?
Yeah, we can take a few minutes
Okay.
to gather our thoughts and go from there, sure.
Okay.
That's fine,
Okay, I'm fine with that.
so, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you very
Okay.
much for clarifying.
Yeah. I think we're getting pushed
Yeah,
out
I think
by
so
the
too,
drum
so.
line. All right, anybody got anything
This
else?
could be drummers behind us. No, thank
No,
you
we
very
don't.
much.
All right, we all set? Okay, so we are back here Wednesday night. Oh. I just don't.
6?
6 o'clock. We're back here again, 6 o'clock Wednesday night to
And then town hall.
have Dr. Girardi.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second
Motion
that.
by Dr. Jenkins, second by Mr. Oliver on the motion. Any discussion? Chair hearing none. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully, we'll see you Wednesday night.